Yes, yes. Welcome to the ancient world of tabletop games. I am Agamemnon, from the historical documentary, Time Bandits. This is a report from a fugitive.
Thanks all the same, Jenkins, but we won't really be needing those, not after the incident at Macho Grande. Ah, there you are, officer. So nice of you to join us. Settle down, ladies and gents, and we'll start the briefing. Tonight's target? No surprises there, chaps and chapesses. Tonight's target is clean board game design. So what the bloody hell is it exactly? Clean board game design is of more interest to your wargamer types, though it spills over into general board games and role-playing games. General board games is at the front, inspecting the situation firsthand. If he's not careful, it'll be shot off. At least he has a second hand. It's on his watch, attached to his remaining hand. We'll turn to Section 86 of the Strafgesetzbuch, the German Penal Code. This makes illegal all usage of symbols relating to unconstitutional organizations, barring accepted usage in art, science, research, and teaching, with a focus on history. Journalism carries the usual exemptions. What does this mean? Everything and nothing. Any organization with aims running contrary to the German constitution is banned under other legal means, along with associated symbols under this part of the law. The Germans wisely do not give us a truly specific model to work from. This allows the law to add to the framework at any time as new unsavory organizations appear. Similar laws operate in Austria and elsewhere. The code is packed with whosoevers and liable tos. There's one section containing a reference to propaganda materials relating to a former National Socialist organization. And that's as close as the section sails to naming the Nazi Party outright. At the basic level, written Nazi imagery is banned. Dodgy symbols are banned. Anyone is free to use Nazi imagery as part of research into history, but not for the glorification or furtherance of Nazi or neo-Nazi organizations. The Hitler salute is also banned. Hakenkreuz-bedecked flags are banned. Badges, slogans, and everything else you'd care to lump under the term propaganda. Anything which is propagated. What's banned? Anything. You'll catch sight of John Voight's character trying to buy an Iron Cross second class with the original Hakenkreuz intact in the movie adaptation of Frederick Forsyth's book, The Odessa File. He is told quite plainly that such medals are not for sale legally. World War II veterans in West Germany who wanted to wear their medals in public could do so without causing legal bother if they arranged for reissue of non-Nazi emblem awards from 1957 onwards. Here's a copy of Forsyth's book, bundled with an illustrated story called The Shepherd. The Odessa File appears in several editions with the S parts of the word Odessa replicated as runes, mimicking the iconography of the SS. While thematic, that sort of design work is something you'd best skip for a German or Austrian edition of the novel. Wargamer Callisto, who runs the YouTube channel Chits and Cats, faced a rather thorny problem. We know from her that German wargamers had difficulty with the importation of World War II-themed American games. An expensive game attracts import duty. Import duty garners the attention of customs officials. Customs officials open packages, checking for attempts to do the tax office out of its cut. On seeing the war theming of a game, officials are to this day duty-bound to check the product for symbols connected to unconstitutional organizations. And that's when the knives come out. Craft knives. Nazi symbolism is stripped away. No Hitler, no SS runes, und so weiter. A cardboard counter representing the 6th SS Panzer Army would have the SS runes scratched out. This brings us to the concept of clean game design. World War II without the Nazi symbolism. Instead of insisting on historical accuracy to operate within the law, game designers show generic symbols that won't fall foul of the penal code, rather than specific Nazi images which will. And that carries us neatly to our secondary objective. Next slide, please, Jenkins. Wrong slide, Jenkins. Though, if we get the chance, there'll be a rendezvous with the French resistance. Settle down at the back there. As I was saying, our secondary objective. Colditz. The box cover art for Escape from Colditz sports an eagle emblem in the Roman Germanic tradition, where a Hakenkreuz once lurked on an earlier version of the game. Reluctance to use a banned emblem on the cover does not extend to the contents. In the associated historical booklet, the Hakenkreuz appears in both historical and educational contexts, well within the confines of the law. Board gaming isn't the only pastime affected by the criminal code. World War II-themed computer games were sent through the anti-Nazi filters, with the work handed over to development teams specializing in a very particular type of localization. It's not just about making the game playable in countries with different languages. As far as World War II goes, it's also about making the game legally playable in countries with anti-Nazi laws. Not that the German Penal Code covers Nazism alone. The commies fall under the code too, and the KKK members aren't far behind. These regulations deal with old Nazis, new Nazis, new Nazis, even newer Nazis, and Nazis so fresh-made that they won't be available for generations to come. I'd planned to make this public information film in mid-August 2018. However, it was reported in early August that Germany was relaxing its stance on banned imagery in computer games, and I put this video further back in the queue, just to let the dust settle a bit. The constant battle between upholders of the penal code and lawbreakers hell-bent on being just a little bit Nazi is a sight to behold, taking in anti-Nazi institutions as well as neo-Nazi outfits. How correct is it to hold up a Nazi flag in Germany as a protest against Nazism, setting fire to that flag to show your disapproval? Should you report yourself for the first half of your act, whipping out the flag, before completing the second half of your act, striking up the matches? There are better uses of your time that don't involve potential injury through burning. The vagueness of the law at times showed the absurdity of dragging anti-Nazi organizations through the courts for wielding Nazi symbols as a form of protest. With the Nazi salute banned, newer than that Nazis took to making limp-wristed half gestures in pale imitation of Herr Hitler's wave. The use of runes to symbolize the SS is banned. New Nazis went looking for old runes that weren't illegal. And when those were banned too, what could they do but use brand new made-up almost runes, leading to a ban? Where do you draw the line concerning the intention behind the act? The moment you ban a gay pride flag waved unconstitutionally by a neo-Nazi, you know that someone somewhere just lost an argument. Would a neo-Nazi wave a gay pride flag unconstitutionally? Only to troll, one imagines. You find absurdity in law wherever you care to glance at the law. The computer game ban in Germany wasn't exactly an outright ban. As usual, to sell a computer game through retail or online outlets, the game company must submit the game to a ratings system. If a product can't pass the system's tests and gain a rating, the game is too hot a potato for the sellers to touch. A ban by indirect means is still a ban. What about the upshot, though? Localization. To get around the ban, out go the Nazi symbols and income made up not quite Nazi symbols. The Wolfenstein games went through this localization, eradicating the Hakenkreuz and replacing it with a science-fictional, not quite Nazi image. Think hard about that for a moment. Official policy in Germany was to ban Nazi images. Neo-Nazis chose different images to get around the ban. Those images were also banned. Over in the computer game world, localization took out Nazi images and put in different images to get around the ban, with complete acceptance under the law. At this stage, we must ask how many Nazis can dance on the head of a pin. The answer depends on whether or not Herr Göring was invited to the shindig. Germany is not alone in this. Localization goes in the other direction. Callisto observed that the German RPG, a role-playing game, not a Panzerfaust, the game Das Schwarze Auge, underwent specific localization when aimed at the American market. The Dark Eye was made a little less dark with the removal of the prostitutes for fear of offending the Americans, though historically we must note that the Americans themselves removed prostitutes from Dungeons & Dragons for fear of offending other Americans. That carries us neatly to our next objective. No surprises there, chaps and chapesses. Tonight's target is Berlin. In an earlier video, I placed this pocket watch upon that game board. Fortune and Glory does not use clean game design on the board, or elsewhere. I'm looking at you, Nazi enemies card deck. The game is Indiana Jones in a box without Indiana Jones. You'd expect Nazis to show up as villains, in their evil military-grade dirigible, no less. We have reconnaissance footage filmed at the highest level, shot here from above to blur the fact that the aircraft is based very much on the Hindenburg, Nazi imagery intact on the tail fins. Unfortunately, our target, Berlin, has Nazi imagery printed on it. I've made the effort to dot the map with landmarks, but there just isn't a model Brandenburg Gate small enough to fit on the board. For the German or Austrian gamer up for a bit of Indiana Jonesing, there's a hunt on for the game. Certain stockists won't go near the product in case there's an official complaint. One thing that counts against the game is the sheer bloody size of it, the amount of plastic loot in the game, and, therefore, the cost of carting a copy across the world. But What does the company Flying Frog Productions have to say on the topic?
The game features many different enemies, but some people may be surprised that they will face off against Nazis. Sometimes games and movies will shy away from depicting Nazis. What led to the decision to feature the Nazis and their insignia? First off, this is a period game that takes place in the latter part of the 1930s. At that time, the Nazi Party had risen to power, and the actual historical fact is that they were searching for ancient artifacts and lost treasures to give them power and aid them in their thirst for world domination. They were very bad guys, and really make for perfect enemies for our heroes to face off against. As for Nazi insignia, sometimes games or movies will use the German Iron Cross or some made-up insignia. Using the Iron Cross always seemed an odd choice because there was a difference between Nazis and Germans. Remember that the first country overtaken by the Nazis was Germany. Making up a symbol would also feel like separating it from the historical context. If you look at some of the best pulp adventure movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Rocketeer, they feature Nazis and their insignia. We always respected that and decided to follow their example. This use of symbols can result in the defacing of game cards or the board itself if the game attracts the attention of the tax people, as mentioned. But to turn to another matter, if you are running a gaming channel on YouTube or elsewhere and you display Nazi iconography in a game, then you must decide whether or not your video is viewable in Germany. Are you prepared to lock the video by geographical means as computer game companies did? Is your video viewable in Germany? Viewable means digitally exported to Germany. If so, you run the risk of seeing a complaint made in Germany under the penal code. That isn't necessarily going to lead to court. The alternative is a strike against your channel, worth keeping in mind. Whosoever within Germany disseminates or produces, stocks, imports or exports, or makes publicly accessible through data storage media for dissemination within Germany or abroad, propaganda material, blah blah blah, list of examples, shall be liable to imprisonment not exceeding 3 years, or a fine. Meaning, some poor bastard in Germany allows your YouTube video through an act of importing and catches sight of a naked Nazi ankle. The horror. That poor bastard shares the link with a friend and says, "Look at this appalling video. Is anyone in breach of the penal code?" "Yeah, old boy, you just shared it with me." If a complaint is made, that complaint is investigated. Either a complaint is made or it isn't. No Hitlers appear in this video. But I'd be well within the law, even as a German video maker, if I included Nazi imagery as examples of banned symbols. My video would fall under an educational heading, one hopes. How does Tide of Iron handle the problem? Yes, the Iron Cross is a solution. You see a cross on the box cover art and on the cards. This is the Fantasy Flight Games version, though the second wave edition by 1A Games kept to the same formula. It's unfortunate that neo-Nazis went down this route before and used these Iron Cross flashes as symbols of something or other that couldn't be prosecuted, so they hoped. A World War II game is bound to feature imagery and iconography related to World War II. I'm stunned myself. Intention behind displays of symbols. Intention is everything under the penal code. A Hindu image predating Nazi seizure of the symbol for party purposes isn't going to carry any criminality to it. Over in the touchier realm of computers, even a cross was altered for German consumption in the Wolfenstein game. You can't win. Here's an expansion for Tide of Iron, Days of the Fox. That chap looks awfully like Rommel. There's a bit of a cult of personality around Rommel. For that reason, he is often considered the finest British general of World War II, and that is a board gaming fact. In certain quarters, Rommel with a Nazi flag above and behind him is unacceptable on a wargame box cover, yet Rommel as the antagonist and representative of the Nazi regime in uniform doesn't raise as many red flags, certainly not any communist ones. There are a few blurry Nazi dignitaries and grainy long shots on game cards, but that's about as close to the wind as Tide of Iron sails. Clean board game design. Companies, be aware of the laws in other territories and minimize the disappointment of game purchasers who open the box to find a slasher when to work on the components. Video makers, use your own judgment on what to show in gameplay videos and unboxings. In Tide of Iron, there are no counters showing SS Panzer groups. Obviously not, for the game is all about a metric ton of plastic panzers lurking inside the box. Given the recent change in view that computer games are now treated as an art form similar to that of cinema, will we see a greater application of leniency in the case of board game designs? Computer games now lean on the crutch of art for freedom of depiction.
Isn't it high time that board games, war games in particular, make use of the other provisions under the code, that they are treated more in the realm of being educational, looking at history that no one should shy away from? I mention that as censorship of computer games with a historical theme has an extra layer of touchiness to it when dealing with German history. There is the risk that sparing Germans the Nazi imagery in games somehow sweeps the horror of history under the heavy carpet of state-controlled censorship. You could watch Indiana Jones beating up the Nazis in a movie packed with Nazi images, then play the related computer game with the Nazi images blanked out, if you were playing the game in Germany. There is anecdotal evidence that German model makers could only purchase kits under the counter, handed over in nondescript wrapping, if they wanted authentic decals on their aircraft. Shades of John Voight buying a medal in a movie there. Decals should be banned. They are the trickiest things a model maker will ever deal with. Screw up a paint job? Repaint it or strip it off. Break a piece? Glue it. Mess up a decal? You're fucked, squire. Clean game design. For fear of offending anyone, everyone is offended. Discuss. Will we see a tide of games, computer or otherwise, bedecked in Nazi symbols flooding the German marketplace? Unlikely. We're talking about an alteration in attitude applied by the people who consider rating computer games. The law is never about the law, but all about the interpretation of the law. Much discussion there. At times it is difficult, impossible, to divorce a symbol from its meaning. There are ways around the law. Is it an act of glorification to show squads and squads of Nazi stormtroopers if they are mown down in combat, showing the folly of Nazi ideology? Indiana Jones is allowed to fight Nazis on the big screen. Can gamers fight Nazis on the board? Not as Indiana Jones. Flying Frog Games didn't spring loot for the licensing option. I raise the point of money as money talks. It's cheaper for a board game company to cater to the law than it is to fight the law. As time passes, the interpretation of law in Germany becomes more tolerant. The shift in view over rating computer games in August 2018 stems in part from a court case in 2017. The history of legal action over computer games in Germany is as tangled as a fairy tale from the depths of the Black Forest. In brief, computer games are now afforded protection as artistic works, though in the case of Bundesfighter 2 Turbo, using the word artistic truly stretches the definition. Play German political figures in a pixel fest of a Street Fighter knockoff. This was all good clean pixel fun until one character contorted his arms and legs into the shape of a Hakenkreuz. Blink and you miss it. A complaint was filed. Investigations opened. The court case ceased. An appeal to higher authority went in to establish why the case halted. This moved proceedings to a loftier venue, and the ruling established protection for that game under an artistic shield. The April 2018 ruling influenced the August decision of the ratings board to look on games with Nazi imagery in a new light. Technically, this was the old light. Bad interpretation of the law once fostered the blanket approach to banning or altering Wolfenstein games. That era is now drifting away. I've chosen not to show Nazi images in this video for an obvious reason. If I showed those images, they'd be fully protected under the law, given the educational, artistic and historical nature of this video. Yes, I've highlighted the absurdity of the situation by leaving things out that I could legally leave in. Point made, none too subtly. That concludes this chat on clean board game design. An easing of attitudes in Germany does not automatically generate a free-for-all atmosphere. We'll always see censorship in one form or another. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an urgent appointment with Renate Richter on the secret Nazi moonbase. Perhaps I shouldn't have mentioned that secret bit. Blast. Though the Iron Sky board game appears to have quite clean game design, sadly it doesn't appear to be awesome game design. Not for that money, cough cough, overpriced movie tie-in cash grab, cough cough. Fire up the rocket, Jenkins. We're off to the moon.